warm welcome, all Red Eyes Creations members. Thank you for tuning in. It's great to have you here. We are continuing our interesting conversation with the Dr. Joye, the author of Eden, The Knowledge of Good and Evil 666. And we've been diving into some fascinating material about the other book that Dr. Joye has written called Antichrist, the cloned image of Jesus Christ. We left off on that note in our first segment. What I want to do before we pick up on that, though, is return a little bit to a few of the things that we discussed in the first segment and go over a few of those things again. One of the things, of course, that is bound to pop up in this kind of conversation here is regarding what is going on today, basically with all the Da Vinci Code fame and the Merovingian lines, and the fact that Jesus, the descendant basically of Jesus, could be alive today, and if that is the case, then if we take into account what you mentioned, Dr. Joye, before we finished off on the first segment, that what we could have then alive today on planet is actually a descendant or actually a cloned person from Jesus, from his blood, basically. What do you think about an idea like that?
Well, my research is actually going to actually show you that that's exactly what has happened. Of course, the Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code, very eye-opening as far as the Merovingian bloodlines, and a lot of people, unless they had done a lot of research, probably were not even aware of anything similar to this if they had not, I guess, read his book.
Yeah.
That particular bloodline is actually the bloodline that I'm telling you about or talked about in the earlier segment about coming from the lineage of Cain. And that I felt like that it came out of the Ham, the weakest link from Noah, and has continued through history. And yes, I do believe that it has been very protected by secret societies all through this period of humans being on this earth, with the intent of trying to bring the Antichrist to power. The thing that I found impossible, though, is that a being cannot inhabit, let's say a spiritual being, cannot inhabit and maintain a human body if it has a soul. And as long as that person is alive, it has a soul. So that is why the Merovingian bloodline, even though it tries to say that Jesus actually married Mary Magdalene, and that they had, in fact, my research talks about 3 different children that could have survived after that. Even if that bloodline would have existed, Satan would have to fight a soul to inhabit that body that he's got to have at the end of time as a Messiah.
Okay.
So because of that, there's been some interesting changes in the royal family's bloodline histories. If you do a little bit of research into some of the people who are really doing those Merovingian bloodlines, you find that even with Prince Charles and Princess Diana, that they went back and incorporated into their blood lineages some very strange beings, and one of them in Charles's bloodline was actually what we call Count Dracula over here.
That's right. Yeah, of course.
States.
Yep.
But
Vlad Tepes, I think it's called. Yeah.
Right. Princess Diana added Methuselah, which was supposedly the daughter of Satan.
Run that by us again. Melusan, okay.
Mythological character, which is supposedly the daughter of Satan.
Okay.
And when I read this, I'm like, why in the world would all these people be trying to change these bloodlines around? Now, we do know that Princess Diana, her bloodline is much more direct from the King James lineage, which is supposedly the direct lineage, some have believed, from the Davidic bloodline, and which would have been a bloodline of Jesus. That she was actually more closer to that bloodline than, say, Charles was. But the interesting thing is how those people have changed their names. For example, Charles's father, Prince Philip, was a German, and he had a German name. And then when he came to England to make, because of what all Hitler did, they changed their names. I mean, there's a lot of switching and changing and redoing that makes it just like, why are they doing all this? But then once you understand the possibility of trying to prove that lineage is going to be where the Antichrist will come from, then you understand all what they've been doing to make it look historically correct, should I say, like politically correct, historically correct, for them to have the Messiah come from their lineage. And interesting enough, there's some major correlations in the fact that Hitler was doing this research many, many moons ago. The Prince Philip's family was actually friends to Hitler, and the fact that the Vatican was involved with Hitler, and the fact that the Knights Templar gave the Shroud of Turin to the Vatican, and that the Vatican has spent billions of dollars to protect the shroud, to keep it closed and keep it air conditioned and do all these little things. It makes you really understand that if it was a fake, why in the world would you spend that kind of money?
Well, I guess you would do it because you want to convince people that it's not a fake. So
even still, the amount of testing and things that have gone on that shroud, being able to duplicate the blood, being able to find out about it, those kinds of things have led to people who control the ability of underground scientists to play, let's say, with manufacturing strange genes, seeing what genes identify each other, how the DNA structure could be a divine spark in this one. If there is a divine spark, those kinds of things, you have accessibility to those kinds of things.
Sure.
And having understood the relationship between those people and how they're so engrossed with each other about these bloodlines, to follow that from what I believe, Cain's lineage and the Davidic lineage, that kind of thing, my research shows the parallelization of that. And then you can get into that if you look at the crest of the royal families and how they have the unicorn, how they have the lion, then you can get an all to the symbolizations of what the unicorn means and what the lion means. And of course in mythology we know that the unicorn was like a hermaphrodite, and that there's been a lot of mythological kinds of things going on, just like I was saying, them incorporating these strange beings in histories. And there's even been researchers out there that some people claim they have seen, like Charles shapeshift.
Sure, yeah.
Things like that. So if in fact the Merovingian bloodline is the Canaanite bloodline that has come down through history to make it appear that it's really the bloodline of Jesus, it will be more of a plus when the Messiah stands up, the created Messiah, let me say, of mankind. When he stands up and says, "Hi, I'm Jesus, and this is the deal, this is my bloodline, da-da-da-da-da." He has to be able, this is very important here, when the Messiah comes, he has to be able to stand in the temple. And the temple in Israel is going to be rebuilt. The Sanhedrin had been non-existent for like 1,600 years, reformed a little over a year ago. Their first priority is to build that temple. They've already had archaeologists working on it, and the temple itself will fit right next to the Dome of the Rock without having to move the Dome of the Rock. Interesting enough, that temple sat there, but the court of the Gentiles runs into the Dome of the Rock. Well, at the end, it says in the Revelation that court of Gentiles is not going to be there. So there is a place to put the temple as it was, where it was in the days that it was there.
Okay.
For the Antichrist to walk into that temple and proclaim himself to be God, he has to have proof. that he is God. The Merovingian bloodline is going to be what they're going to use for that. At the same time, I believe that the Vatican will have the shroud. The blood they took off the shroud is what has been used for the clones.
Mm-hmm.
They will be able to say, as the false prophet, who the Book of Revelation says will be the one that brings the beast to power, gives him life, gives him whatever, they're the ones that have allowed that to happen. They'll be able to say, yes, and his blood does match this, and this is Jesus. Well, it says in the book of Revelation that will be the abomination, in the book of Daniel, that will be abomination of desolation. That is the worst type of abomination a person could commit against Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
What would be, in your mind, the worst thing you could do to Jesus? Walk in his temple, because he said, in 3 days I will raise this temple. He wasn't talking about a building. He was talking about his body. So the desecration of his temple, which would be his body in a clone form, with Satan sitting in it, in a rebuilt temple in Israel, with the Vatican saying, is this really him? And this guy can bring signs and wonders and do whatever. Then you look at all the Jewish nation that's there. They're waiting for their Messiah. If they're not Christians, they're waiting for their Messiah to appear. A little over, 8 months ago, one of their important Jewish sages passed away, and he had left a note. I guess it'd been over a year. He left a note that was supposed to be opened the year after his death, and it was supposed to say who he thought the Messiah was. They opened it up. He had written in a little 6-word thing in Hebrew that it was Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
And he claimed that he had actually visited with him. So in other words, it would mean he had to be born. Well, we know that Jesus said, when I come back, I'm coming in the air. But if you are cloned, like the Arthurian legend says, the blood of Arthur will be brought back as a child. It will live again.
Okay, I see what you mean.
And so, if that was the case, then of course we've got Jesus alive again, sitting in the temple with Satan internally, and he's got the false prophet standing there saying, "This is really who this is." Signs and wonders, and the blood matches.
One thing I'm thinking about is the idea that. In the Bible, as far as I understand it, it is expressed that the first one who will claim to be the Son of God, or the return of Jesus, is not the one, and it's a deceiver, and everyone knows that is reading the Bible and knows his stuff. So anyone that should come first and claim to be the new Messiah, or Jesus even, or the returned manifestation of God is going to be looked upon as Satan, basically, right?
Right, he should be the Antichrist, and it says his number will be 666, and it will be a man.
But what I'm asking here also is then no one that would what I'm getting at is. If Satan knows this too, why would he do the obvious then and manifest himself and do all of this when the people that are reading the Bible and are up to speed with this stuff knows that it's gonna be wrong?
Well, what worries me about this is that in Revelations, it does talk about that in